Today is Friday, May 2nd. I am the interviewer, Amy Moritz, speaking with Donna Ditota via Zoom. Donna grew up in the Syracuse, New York region and played basketball at St. Bonaventure University from 1979 to 1983. She was a four-year starter and two-time MVP for the team, and at the time of her graduation in 1983, held the team record for rebounds and blocks. Donna began her career as a sports reporter for the Syracuse Post Standard in 1986, with her primary beat covering Syracuse University men's basketball. She was the first woman to be named the New York Sportswriter of the Year in 2023 and was elected to the U.S. Basketball Writers Association Hall of Fame in 2024, along with numerous honors from her alma mater and the Jandoli School of Communications as well. So, Donna, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today.
Of course.
So first question, tell me about a time that you remember falling in love with sports.
Pretty much my whole life, like my dad was a huge sports fan, and from from what I remember when I was a really little kid, like we had a basketball hoop on our front yard, on our driveway, and we had a really big backyard, and it was fenced in on all sides, and we used to play wiffle ball in the backyard, and we played basketball in the front yard, and then in the winter when it got cold out, my brother and I would get the hose out and hose down the backyard, and we would skate back there. So since I was a really little kid, sports has always been like a really integral part of my life. I mean, my parents would take us to baseball games, basketball games. I just grew up around sports.
So obviously you were playing in your, with your family and, in your yard. What opportunities existed for, for girls, for organized sports for you? And also remind us exactly where you grew up.
Yeah, I grew up in Syracuse.
In Syracuse,
Um,
okay.
yeah, I lived in I've always lived in the city of Syracuse, and I played softball when I was, probably 12 and 13ish, maybe. And I played high school sports. I was just looking at this the other day because I was at my parents' house, and I had a yearbook from my grade school, which I didn't even remember existed, but I was just over there for something else and was looking for something and I found it. And so we started, I think, a girls basketball team when I was in seventh grade. That was the first year we ever had a girls basketball team. We always had a boy. I went to St. Daniel's. I went to Catholic schools my whole life. And so I started playing organized basketball when I think I was in seventh grade. So there were some opportunities. I mean, it wasn't like something that a lot of girls did, frankly, but there were a few things, that were available.
And what was it about basketball that you kind of ended up gravitating towards?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 6'1", and it's always been, it's always been the sport that I've been best at. So, I ran track in high school. I played softball, but this was the sport that I was best at. So, and I had the size for it, and I had the passion for it. I was interested in it, and I was good at it. So that's why I think that's the sport that I gravitated toward.
What was the basketball like when you were playing in high school?
Really competitive. I mean, I remember, back then there weren't a ton of Division one programs, but I remember it being extremely competitive. And my own high school team was really good. We had girls getting basketball scholarships from the time I was a freshman till the time I graduated. Every year there was a girl who got a basketball scholarship. And that back then in the late 70s, I mean, that was really rare. And so, our team was very good, and we played in a pretty good division here in Syracuse. So it was
Mhm.
competitive.
So were you, like you said at that time, it was maybe rare for, the basketball scholarship. So, but because you
Yeah.
had teammates that was that on your radar as a
Yes,
possibility
for
for you?
sure. Yes. Yep.
And then,
That was always something that I'd aspire to. Yeah.
so
Because
then
like I
talk.
said, we were good. Our team was good, and I played with good players. And in the summer, up here, so I live in the city of Syracuse, and I still live there. I live on the west side. I used to live on the east side of the city. And at that point, I would ride my bike, and then when I got a little older, I'd take my mom's car to Henniger. In this Henniger High School is a city school that was probably, I don't know, 5 miles from my house. And I would either ride my bike there, and during the summer, they had all kinds of summer runs. So you could get a pickup game there. So I was exposed to a lot of basketball players, a lot of basketball coaches, just a lot of basketball from the time I was a really young kid. And at that point, there weren't a lot of girls there. There were probably three girls, two girls for sure that I remember that I played with in high school that went, and then I went all through high school and all through college, and even probably after college too, because it was you would get runs with guys. And there was three courts going back there. And at that point, I was just exposed to so much basketball. I was exposed to so many high level players, the boys or the girls, that I knew it was a possibility.
You mentioned there weren't a lot of girls that were playing there. So was it easy for you to fit in and play because you loved the game and knew the game, or what was that dynamic when it's mostly the boys that were playing those pickup games?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was. I mean, there were obviously there were sort of there were three courts, and like the one court got all the best players, like all the best guy
Mhm,
players, and then it went down like the next best players were in the next court, and then the next best players. And so
mhm,
most of the time, I probably played in the second or the third best. But every once in a while, if like there weren't enough players, I would get to play with a really good guys. And these are guys who played at Syracuse University and guys who were really good players. But I never like weirdly, now that I think about it, like I never really felt like it was odd, or I never felt like really um shunned or discriminated against. I mean, it was just uh I was there every day, and I could play, and obviously not as good as some of the really good players, but certainly as good as some of the not great players. you know so I never really had a I never really felt like people didn't take me seriously, or I mean, I got picked on teams, so
yeah. Did you ever participate in Empire State Games? Was
I
that was
did.
that
I played
you
in the first
did?
ever Empire State Games.
Okay. Can you
Yeah.
tell me about that experience? Because I've talked with some women from the Buffalo area, and they felt how crucial that was to also recruiting, because this is pre AAU time too.
Yeah. Yeah, I played on the first AAU team. I was representing the Central Region, the Scholastic Central Region team. I don't remember like how it being a boon to like my recruiting or anything. I just
Okay.
remember like the spectacle of it, and it was really fun. And I mean, it was like I was I think I probably was 17, 16 or 17, and it felt very high level. We marched into the old Archbold Stadium up here, and it felt very Olympic-y, for somebody when I was that young. That's what it had a feel for it. I don't remember too much about it being instrumental or impactful at all in the way I was recruited. I mean, it was obviously I got to spend a summer playing with really good players because
Mhm,
we practiced quite a bit, and then we played the games.
mhm. So tell me how you then ended up at St. Bonaventure, and what was your recruitment like, that process?
Well, I think the two schools I was either going to go to Syracuse or I was going to go to St. Bonaventure, because at that point, I knew I wanted to be a journalist. And those were the schools that had good journalism programs and that were interested that had recruited me. And I don't know if I would have gone to Syracuse if I'd gotten a better offer from them, but um, I really kind of like the idea of being away from home, and just sort of exploring life outside of my comfort zone. So that's one of the reasons I liked MJ a lot. MJ was a good recruiter, and I liked the school when I went to visit. Like I said, I was a Catholic school girl. I mean, I went to Catholic grade school, I went to Catholic high school, and there was a comfort level for me there. I felt like it was a welcoming, caring community, and it turned out to be, obviously one of the best decisions of my life. I mean, got a great education there, and I met some of the best friends that I still have.
What was it like to play for MJ?
I, what was it like to play for MJ? Oh my God, I forget. It was so long ago. She was, not a super, super intense person, but when she said something, when she got mad, like everybody was like, whoa, like she's mad about this, and, we better pay attention. The interesting thing about playing for MJ was she coached me my first 2 years, recruited me, coached me my first 2 years, and then she left because I think there was some sort of issue with, like you'll have to ask her, but there was some sort of issue with her. Uh, she had to either take a job in the administration and work full time there, or I don't really remember. So anyway, for a year she stepped away, and that year was brutal. We had just a guy that the athletic director hired from Olean, who had never coached women before, who had never coached girls before. And it was like a disaster of a season. It was just my junior year was awful. And then she decided to come back my senior year, and when we actually had a pretty good team that year and played pretty well. And I think we made some sort of postseason tournament. I don't remember which one it was, but she was looking back on it, I think at that point you don't really appreciate because you're so wrapped up in so many other things when you're in college. You don't really, and I feel like she was really just a pioneer in women's sports because I think she really cared about us. She really wanted us to get good education. She wanted us to be good players. And I think she was really invested in women's sports. And I think back then it was the rare coach. Like I had a high school coach that was like that too. And I was lucky to have played for two coaches who were so sort of passionate about women's sports and so passionate about our team and so interested in us getting better and just playing well. And so I like people ask me this all the time. They say, like, do you remember like a great game that you played in? Do you remember? And I don't remember I don't remember anything that happened during the seasons of any of these games in terms of games, in terms of game preparation, in terms of the only thing I remember is like crazy shit that we did like on road trips or like crazy stuff that we did in the dorms or crazy stuff we did at like stunts that we did at practice. I remember nothing at all about like strategy or like playing in games. I remember none of that. So I'm like
Well,
not a great resource for like breaking down MJ's coach. I really don't remember any of it. I don't. I just remember like the fun we had and like the bonds that I made there that still remain to this day.
but it also sounds like that was something that MJ fostered, that atmosphere where that culture to create those, those bonds, and that became those life lasting bonds.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is, the people that you recruited. I mean, part of it is, I think it's a very inexact science recruiting. You don't really know. I mean, when you're recruiting a kid, you don't really know what kind of a person they are that much. You can ask around as much as you want, but I think it's a really hard thing to put your finger on when you're recruiting. But just the alchemy of it happened to work out for the teams that I was on during my career there. And I'm like eternally grateful because, like I said, I'm still very good friends with girls that were on my team, women that were on my team.
What do you, I mean, obviously, you already said like you don't remember much like
I
X's and
don't.
O's and games and practices and
No,
what those were like. Do you remember I was just curious at that time. Do you remember like were you practicing every day? Like
oh yeah.
was it the same? And okay, and then also was it, how did you feel compared to the guys team as far as resources and all of that?
Well, I mean, they got way better stuff than we did. I mean, and we
Mhm.
also had to practice around their schedule. So they got the first pick of times that they were going to practice. So I think we practiced, I want to say after them every day. So unless something glitchy happened, unless they had to have an early practice for some reason, or it was a getaway day, whatever it was. But we definitely, our schedules and our basketball lives revolved around what the guys did, and we were sort of we were obviously were secondary to them, and certainly like uniforms and gear and all that stuff. Like we didn't get nearly as much as the guys did. I do remember that.
Do you, I mean, how do you remember how you and your teammates, like, was that obviously something you remember and you noticed because it's pretty obvious, but was it something that you wanted, you try to fight for anything better, or you were like what, I guess, was it just something that because that's the time and you just, this is how it is, or
Yeah,
how was
so
that?
the only like real protest I remember is after my junior year, like we needed to get rid of that coach. I mean, it was just a disgraceful season, honestly. And so I remember I was the team captain, and I remember going up with a couple of my teammates to the athletic director and saying, like, listen, like this is just not going to work out. Like I don't know, I don't, and it literally was the worst year of my competitive playing days. And I just remember going up to Larry Weesey and saying, like, this is not going to work. Like, we need to get a better coach. This guy is like, just doesn't know anything really. And so that's the only real protest I remember. Like, I remember us sort of whimpering about various things and sort of joking about, like, the shoes or whatever it was. But that's the only real stand that I think that we took during my tenure there.
Mhm. What was it like to be a student athlete, a female student athlete on campus?
I mean, don't know what it was like to be not a student athlete on
There's an
campus.
athlete,
I
right?
don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, it was, I was a good student and it didn't impact, I think one of the things that sports does is it makes you really, really be good about scheduling and be good about, slotting different time periods to study or whatever you got to do. You just have to, you have to make all that stuff work, and so I think I was a much more disciplined student probably than I would have been had I not played sports because, there's only so many hours in the day. And if you're in the gym for 3 hours of it, that's 3 hours that other people that aren't playing sports have to do whatever they want to do. So I think it just made me a lot more disciplined.
You mentioned that going into college, you knew you wanted to go into journalism.
Mhm.
So what was your experience like at the at the Jandoli School? And sometimes you go to school and that's what you think you want to do. Obviously, that encouraged you even more. So can talk a little bit about that path, that journalism path for you at school.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I got a really good education there. I mean, we had to, at that point, we had to do an internship to grad. I don't know what the requirements are now, but you had to do an
Mhm.
internship to graduate and you had to write a thesis to graduate. And I feel like I got a good education there, all the way around. I mean, just with all the classes that I took. And uh, I also I wrote for the BV and I was the sports editor at the BV. So that was really, really helpful as well. Um, I just felt like it really helped shape me, and again, it's hard to say if I had gone to Missouri or something, what my journalism career would have looked like, but because I didn't go there, but I felt like I was prepared to do a job.
And so what like when did you decide, when did you know that sports writing, like that was your career? Was there something that kind of put together for you?
No, you know what? I was always been I've always been interested in reading, always been interested in writing. I was good at writing. I loved sports. And I just felt like a good sort of marriage of the two kinds of things. Didn't seem, I'm not the kind of person who isn't like a 9 to 5er who like would get up at 7 in the morning and, go into my office with my briefcase and my whatever it is, just not my personality. So it just seemed like something that I would be interested in and that I might be good at.
Mhm. How did those, it's reaching back in there, but how do those experiences at the BV, working at the student newspaper, being sports editor, coupled with being a student athlete? And I guess here's a question too, like, did your experience as a college student athlete um, impact at all your view or your job then when you became a sports writer and then were writing about college athletes?
Oh, absolutely. It did. Because I think I'm much more empathetic. I've been in places where I've missed a free throw, or I've been in places where I've, made a big game winning shot, or I've won in places where we've had a really bad season, or, I mean, I think it's made me really empathetic to how things work. And I think I just understand the game a lot better, because I played and because I've watched so much basketball. And I think it really has helped me, and also, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I say this all the time. I'm 6'1", and I talk to a lot of basketball players, and it helps that I'm tall, I think it just from just a strangely interpersonal kind of talking to people, nobody's that much taller than I am.
And that actually you can't underestimate the how
Right.
important that kind of is, right?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think it's super helpful. I do.
Mhm. You're to be able to be empathetic, um, has was that ever something that was different? How do I say this? Like I'm thinking about gender roles and gender stereotypes, and that women are definitely usually seen in general as being more empathetic. You obviously see that as a strength in your ability and your reporting. Do you think that that's was always universal in sports writing, or is that? I'm not saying it's only women
Yeah,
that do
I
it,
get
but
asked a lot of gender questions because I've been for the longest time one of the few female sports writers, right? So I get asked, and I always answer it like I don't know what it's like to be a guy, like asking these kinds of questions. I don't know. I just know that it's helped me understand how to phrase a question or how to probe a little bit deeper about something or when to back off and how to ask something. I think it's helped shape the way I've done my job. And I do think that there is a certain um, understanding of various circumstances that helps. when you're trying to ask a question. Like it's easy to ask, like, oh, how did you, what happened on that game-winning free throw? Like, what were you thinking about? Whatever. But it's harder to ask, when you threw the ball away, like, what, those are questions are harder to ask. And I think you have to be direct about it. You have to ask it. You can't, meander around about it. But I also think you have to ask in words that will elicit a better response. And I think it's helped because like I said, I've been that person who has, had a great play and has had a terrible play. And I think it's helped shape the way I ask questions. I don't know if it's because of my gender or just it's because that's what my personality is.
Right. Mhm. So in 1986, you started at the Syracuse Post Standard. So just the beginnings of your, I know you had sports writing wasn't your first job, right? Weren't you working at a
Right.
business
I worked
publication
at a business
first?
magazine. Yep.
Hmm.
Yep. And that was
And
helpful too because I learned how to do all kinds of stuff. You have to learn how to do layout, write headlines, write cut lines. I mean, I did all that at the BV too, which by
Mhm.
the way was extremely helpful. Like I would tell every kid, every college student, work for your student newspaper or work for your student TV station, your radio station, whatever it is. It's so
Mhm.
helpful. Um, I forgot what we were talking about. What was the question again?
Oh, your first job at you were at the
Yeah, the
business magazine, but then going
business
into the,
newspaper.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was helpful. Business magazine was really helpful because I learned a lot about a lot of stuff. Like I learned a lot about how, like the stock market, like stuff that I knew nothing about. I had to really do a lot of research to ask questions about this stuff. Um, but I'd always wanted to get back into sports, and I applied for a ton of jobs. And I finally, like, there was a woman at the Post Standard. At that point, it was the Post Standard Herald. There was two newspapers in Syracuse. We were in a massive building. It was a huge news organization. And the woman who hired people was a St. Bonaventure grad. Her name is Rosemary Robinson. And I think honestly, she just finally hired me because I had annoyed her so much. She was like, stop calling me and ask me for a job. And she hired me to cover regional sports. At that point, we were so big, we were covering like outside even our area. We were covering high school and colleges outside the Syracuse or Onondaga County area. And it was a great I did that for, like, I think a year or 2, then they brought me I worked for the Herald, so then you had to be hired from this regional sports pool, regional desk to into one of the 2 newspapers. So I worked for the Herald, which is the afternoon paper, and I wanna say I covered high schools maybe for 6 or 7 months, and then I covered men's basketball, Syracuse's men's basketball team, and then I did that, I don't know how long, I mean, 10 years, and then I got off that beat because the papers at that point had merged. Maybe it was longer than 10 years. And I covered lacrosse and I did a bunch of just takeout reporting. Like I did a bunch of longer stories for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. It's all a blur to me, Amy. And then I've been on back on the basketball beat for probably, I don't know, 10, 15 years. I don't know, something like that. Um, yeah. So that was
Were,
my little path through the Syracuse newspapers.
that was your path through that. Were there other women in the sports pool reporting?
Uh, Over the years, we've had a few women, not a lot. When I was just looking at this picture the other day. I don't know where it came across one of my, maybe it was, I was looking through I don't know. I came across this photo of me in the Herald Journal sports department, and it was me and probably like 18 dudes. I don't know. So just like a picture that I hadn't seen in a really long time, and it just reminded me, like, wow, like that's right. I was like the only woman on that staff. For the longest time I was, and right now I also am the only woman on our staff. We've had a couple of other women cycle through over the years, but not a lot.
Mhm. Was there, did you have to learn to negotiate anything being the only woman in the room, either whether it was the newsroom or whether it was covering something? Was there any learning curve around that?
I mean, I think there's always a perception that women sports writers aren't that tough, that the men are going to be better at getting a tougher story or getting a tougher answer. But I don't think that's true. It's not true. And I think that's probably one of the things I've fought against in my career, that, would I get a tougher story or would I get I'd probably, what I don't think that I have. Um, In terms of coverage, I mean, back in the early days, it was rough. I mean, you had to really, there was a ton of sexism and a ton of like, when I was younger, it was brutal. Like you had to like navigate all kinds of like guys trying to hit on you. And like, it was just so bizarre back in the day, and then once I established my career, then I didn't really have any of those kinds of problems. And I think that, I've always been a pretty confident, authoritative type of personality. And I'm not somebody who's gonna let you walk all over me, or, like I said, here's my dog, here's my puppy. I'm big, I'm tall, and I think I have a something of an authoritative way about me. Like, I don't think people are gonna walk all over me.
Right. And so is that like you notice like once you establish yourself in your career like that, um, you had that right, that sort of establishment. So then it was
It still
did
happens. I mean, it
it's
still happens every now and again. I mean, it still does happen. I mean, even though I've been in this business a really long time, and it still happens. Like, somebody will say something, I'll be like, "What are you talking about right now?" Or people will underestimate me, I think, still after all these years. But it's like the all the crazy stuff that happened when I was in my 20s. That's all done. And I don't know what's going on with these younger women now, if it's how, you know, crazy it is. But it was tough back in the day.
well, and that was also without social media, which
Right,
the
right.
younger women are dealing with that as well. Because did you have what was the interaction you would have with readers in your early
Hardly
days?
any. Like, I hardly had any.
Any?
I mean, if somebody wanted to send me a letter or send me an email back then, I mean, but I rarely interacted with fans back then.
Do you do that more now?
Yeah, I do. I've cut back on my social media use over the last few years just because to me it's just not worth it. Like, I don't need somebody coming after me on Twitter, about some kind of stupid thing, and I don't have the energy for it or the interest in engaging some of these people. And so I've cut back a lot of my Twitter, I would say for sure interactions with people. But I still like, I had a newsletter this year for the first time, and I got a lot of people emailing me from the newsletter. And those conversations were a lot saner and a lot more focused on basketball and stuff that was topical and things that I had written about. And so those sort of email conversations were a lot better than stuff that if I had ever engaged with people on Twitter. I haven't been on Facebook in years. Mostly it's because political. I don't want to deal with anybody's, political beliefs and their insane, not not vaccinating their kid, whatever it is. I mean, I don't want to deal with any of that. So I haven't been on Facebook in a really long time. I am on Instagram, and I don't have I I should be better about filtering out people who I don't know that follow me on Instagram, but I just don't pay that much attention to it,
Right.
honestly.
Um, at Syracuse, covering men's basketball, Syracuse men's basketball certainly has a history of national presence, national prominence, and Jim Boeheim, and that legacy. What was it like to cover that program through a lot of ups and downs, a lot of ups, and
Yeah.
a coach that could kind of seem not controversial maybe at times, but maybe prickly with the media?
Yeah, I mean, Jim Mahon was an interesting. People ask me about him all the time. Like, he was to me great in so many ways because he said stuff. He could be controversial, but he always said stuff, which is what you want as a reporter. And people would always say to me like, "Oh, I can't believe he yelled at you at this press conference." I'm like, and at the moment it does sting a little bit, but like, to me, I would trade that in a heartbeat for somebody who's A, boring, or B, never says anything, or C, doesn't give you access to himself or to his program. The best thing about him was like you could call him up any day of the week and ask, and he'd pick up the phone and he'd ask him stuff and he'd answer. He might be in a bad mood, but he might not be in a bad mood. And he was a guy who I think really appreciated. He's a guy who grew up with newspapers and appreciated newspapers and appreciated coverage and stuff like that. So I, look back at the Boeheim years as sometimes as sort of rocky as they could be, because there was NCAA violations. There was, is he going to retire? Is he not going to retire? He there was a coach in waiting, then there was not a coach in waiting. there were all kinds of stuff that happened during his tenure at Syracuse, but he was always interesting. And as a reporter, that's what you want. You want to cover somebody who's interesting, who has things to say, who is impactful, and who um, sort of understands what your job is. And so for a lot of reasons, I really liked covering him. Again, like he could be prickly, he could be difficult, he could be moody. You could call him and mm, it would not be a good conversation, but at least he'd pick up the phone. He'd talk to you about it. And I think that's really lacking these days with a lot of coaches. They don't see the value in it, and they've got a lot of these teams. Well, every program now has their in-house PR people, and that's how they're sort of managing media. Although, if you ask me, I mean, people see through the PR push, PR lens of these in-house, in-school media people. So, yeah, it was
Yeah, I
it
was
was
gonna.
it was an interesting time. Let's put it that way. It was interesting to cover him and cover those teams because a lot of the time they were really good.
Mhm. Yeah, I was gonna ask how that's changed because he, like you said, like he would pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Coaches used to have their phone numbers in the media guide. You could call them. You'd have to go through three people. Where how has that changed?
Oh, it's completely changed. I mean, it's hard to get Adrian Autry on the phone. It's hard to get him. And we used to have a lot better access to players. And we don't have nearly as good access to players anymore. At least the locker room is still open, which is great, because we do have at least every couple of days we can see people and ask them some questions. But you don't really get to know the players as well anymore because we used to be able to go to practice and we talk to them, and like engaging with people that you cover is really important because it establishes a sense of trust and a sense of just knowing who these people are as people, and it's helpful in your reporting to know that kinds of stuff. And that all has really diminished in the last couple of years.
Mhm. I want to ask you about covering women's sports, and I know that you've covered a lot of sports. Where have you ever felt that you wanted to, I mean, not promote because that's not what journalists do,
Yeah.
but wanted to cover or do those stories?
It's been one of the sort of vexing questions of my career, to be honest, because um, so we at this point we meter stories, right? So we put something up on our website and we know exactly how many people are reading it. And so the interest in women's sports has not been that high. Whatever the story, unless it's some sort of controversial, a coach gets fired, whatever it is, right? But people don't read the stories. So as a reporter, I want my work to be impactful. I want people to read what I'm writing. But as a woman who played sports, I really want us to write more about women's sports. And it's a very, very difficult line for me in that well, at this point in my career it's not going to happen because we have a total of four reporters on our staff, and one columnist. And so it's I mean, I've covered some women's basketball, I've covered some women's sports over the years. But because these staffs are all shrinking, sports editors who are uniformly men, there's very few men sports writers, want their reporters to cover stories that people are going to read. And, I get it. Where it's a business, you have to make money. You have to people have eyes on your website. But it's always been a very vexing issue for me, because I think women's sports should be covered better. And I have pushed over the years for us to have not even just to have a beat writer to cover the women's basketball team. And we haven't had a beat writer cover women's basketball in years. And for the reasons that I've cited, people don't read the stories. And so the conversations I've often had over the years is, well, if we covered them better, people would know who these players were and maybe they would read them. But with the dwindling amount of resources that all these news organizations are having, I think it's more difficult for sports editors to say, yeah, let's spend some time with the women's basketball program, especially if they're not that good, you know?
I was going to ask you. You kind of alluded to it. Like, is it? You could also make a chicken and egg argument. Like, well,
Right.
people don't read about it because they don't know. They haven't had a chance to develop an interest and a following in it, whereas you've got generations who have followed Syracuse men's basketball.
Right. I mean, I think we did a better job during the last two, not this season, we did a terrible job covering women's basketball here, but the last previous 2 years, Syracuse had a really good player, a really dynamic player in Deasia Fair. And she was, I mean, she was an All-American type of player. And so we covered them. They won a lot of games and we covered them better. And this year they were not that good and they didn't have a Deasia Fair. So we didn't cover them hardly at all. And it was bad, you know? Um, and I don't know if I still think people weren't reading a ton of women's basketball stories, even with Deasia here, but they were a little more interested because the team was really good. So I think part of it is the team has to be better. Like I mean, we've even seen it this year with like the drop in the men's. Nobody's reading the men's basketball stories either because they're not that good.
Mhm.
So it's part of it is how well these teams are performing. It sort of equates to how much people read stories about them. So I don't know. I mean, I think if Syracuse was better, the women's team was better this year, we probably would have covered them more. But I don't know how much more we would have covered them.
So I want to question to you back to Bonaventure days. And when you played, they were the Lady Bonnies.
Yeah,
And I know that your group, like Lady Bonnies for life, right? And so there was that move too, where I want to say it was like in the 90s. I want to say it was almost when I was at school, where people got away from the lady moniker, except unless you were Pat Summit, who was
yeah.
never going to let that go. I just wonder where as someone who was, played and identified as a Lady Bonnie, like where you kind of see that on that spectrum.
I'm anti Lady Bonnie, honestly.
Are you?
Yeah, I mean, you come out there, you look like women. You're a woman. You're a woman. You don't need the lady. Like I don't call them men's bonnies. I don't, or gentleman bonnies or whatever it is. I mean, I don't know. Why does there need to be a distinguisher between the two? I'm much like bonnies is good. I'm good with that.
Uh-huh. Um, where did just a kind of just a general question, but where in your whether it was your playing days or in your sports writing days, or maybe the same, where did you find the most support?
For what? Like in terms of what kind of support are you talking about?
I get like emotional support or like
Oh,
support, like if you, yeah.
I mean, I'm a pretty tough person. Like can't say that I ever like, I suppose like after bad games or, you would talk to your teammates about it or talk to your roommate about it or but well, like I was a pretty quick bounce backer and even stuff like, like I have a partner, my partner Bill, we've been together for almost 15 years and like if stuff happens in my career, I'll talk to him about it, but I can't say that I've like desperately needed any kind of emotional support over the years, honestly.
Mhm. And then my last question. So I'm not gonna. I know you said you don't have memories of like a favorite
Oh,
game or
I wish I
but
did.
what is a favorite memory? You kind of alluded to it, but like what's a favorite memory? Like when you think of your time playing at St. Bonaventure, like what's the memory or feeling that comes up for you?
It just was a very fun, fulfilling period of my life. Like I said, I had really good friends. I was a competitive person. I still am a competitive person, but I was a much more competitive person then. And the sports, was an outlet for me to compete. I was very interested in my basketball career, really wanted to be good and worked a lot on my game. And I just remember the camaraderie, like the friendships that were there and all the goofy, like, like pranks that we played on each other and, like just stupid stuff like that. I don't remember that much about the games or the practices themselves. I mean, I really don't.
That's I have to tell you that almost every woman that I've interviewed that's not currently playing, right? That there's
Yeah.
one or two that's currently playing that I've talked to. They've all said the people. They've all talked about the
Yeah.
friendships and the relationships. No one's
Yep.
mentioned like every once in a while they're like, "Oh, this was like a really," but it was about the people around that game, and it
Yeah.
was it was really about that as opposed to anything that happened.
Right. I mean, I maybe if I like were to flip through a yearbook or flip through some stories, I might remember a game here or there, but I really don't remember too much about the games, like the individual games. I really don't.
Right. Yeah. Well, Donna, thank you so much.